The sands of time are constantly shifting, burying the past and revealing the future in unexpected ways. We dig through the dunes to find the stories that were meant to be remembered forever. Hit subscribe now and don't let these moments slip away.
I didn't say a word, not one word. I just stood there in my own kitchen, the one I had mopped every Saturday morning for 31 years, and I watched my son slide a manila envelope across my table like he was serving papers on a stranger. "Sign it, Mom. It's the right thing to do." He didn't even look up from his phone. "My name is Annette. I'm 64 years old. I taught third grade for 27 years in Savannah, Georgia. I raised 2 children by myself after my husband passed from a heart attack in 2009. I clipped coupons. I worked summers. I skipped vacations I never took. And I did all of it so that my son could have a life I never had. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest. His name is Tyrone. He's 38 years old. He has his father's jaw and his father's eyes and absolutely none of his father's character. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it took me the better part of a decade to admit it to myself, and I'm not going to soften it now. His wife's name is Felicity. She came into our lives about 4 years ago, right around the time Tyrone started forgetting to return my calls. They married in the spring of 2022. Small ceremony. I paid for the catering. I remember the morning after their wedding. I woke up early and sat on the back porch of the venue we'd rented, still in my mother of the groom dress, drinking coffee alone because nobody had thought to save me a seat at the head table the night before. I told myself it was a seating chart error. I told myself that a lot. By the time that envelope showed up on my kitchen table in November of last year, I had told myself a lot of things. It started small. It always does. Felicity didn't like the way I gave unsolicited advice. Fair enough, I probably did give too much of it. I'm a retired school teacher. Redirecting people is something I do without thinking. But then she didn't like the way I hugged my son too long when I saw him. Then she didn't like that I had a key to his apartment. The apartment I had co-signed for when he was 26 and couldn't get approved on his own. Then she didn't like that I called him on Sunday mornings, which had been our tradition since he left for college. Tyrone stopped answering Sunday calls somewhere around March of 2023. I told myself he was busy. That summer, I had a minor procedure, nothing serious, a polyp removed, routine colonoscopy, but I was alone at the hospital for 6 hours. I had called my son the week before. He knew. He said he'd try to make it. I sat in that recovery room with a paper gown and a cup of apple juice, and I kept checking my phone. He texted at 4:47 p.m. "Hope it went okay. Felicity had something." I saved that text for a long time. I don't know why. I think I kept it the way you keep evidence of something you're not ready to name yet. That fall, Tyrone came to me with an investment opportunity. A friend of his, someone he'd met through Felicity's brother, was flipping properties in Charleston. He needed a co-investor. He needed $60,000. I want to be honest with you. My first instinct was no. $60,000 was most of what I had left in my savings after paying off my house. But Tyrone sat across from me at this same kitchen table, and he looked at me with his father's eyes and he said, "Mom, I need you to trust me. Just this once. I'm trying to build something for our future." Our future. I wrote the check. By January, the contact number for the investment company was disconnected. By February, Tyrone stopped bringing it up. By March, when I asked about it directly, he told me I was being dramatic and that these things took time. I was 63 years old, and my son told me I was being dramatic about $60,000. That was the first time something in me went very quiet. I want to tell you about my house because it's important. I bought this house in 2003. 3 bedrooms, old oak floors, a back porch that faces a row of pecan trees my neighbor planted before I moved in. I paid off the mortgage in 2019. It's mine, completely mine. The deed is in my name, and my name only. When Tyrone got married, he moved into a rental with Felicity about 40 minutes away. They were trying to save for a down payment. I understood that. I offered to help when I could. What I didn't fully understand until much later was that Felicity had been telling people, her mother, her friends, I don't know who else, that my house was going to be theirs eventually, not as an inheritance someday. Now, she had started talking about it like it was already settled, like I was just a placeholder living in a house that was rightfully hers. I found this out from my neighbor, a woman named Greta, who has lived next door to me for 18 years. Greta told me, carefully, over sweet tea on a Tuesday afternoon, that Felicity had knocked on her door 3 weeks earlier to introduce herself as the future owner of this property. She had asked Greta about the zoning, about parking, about whether the pecan trees were on my lot or the city's. I sat with my sweet tea and I didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I said, "Greta, thank you for telling me." And I went inside and I sat at my kitchen table in the dark for a while. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday. Tyrone came over without calling first, which he never used to do, and Felicity was with him, which she almost never was. She stood near my refrigerator with her arms crossed and her eyes moving around my kitchen like she was measuring it. Tyrone put the envelope on the table and told me to open it. It was a deed transfer document, prepared by an actual attorney. They wanted me to sign my house over to them, not sell it. Sign it over. The document listed a transfer price of $1. For love and consideration, it said. I read it twice. Felicity said, "We've been patient, Annette. We need to start building equity. You don't have a mortgage. You're not using the space the way it should be used. It makes sense for everyone." I looked at my son. He was looking at the table. I said, "Tyrone, look at me." He looked up. I said, "You want me to sign my house over to you for $1. He said, "It's not like that. You'd still live here. We'd just have the deed." I said, "So you would own the house I live in?" Felicity said, "We'd handle the property taxes. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." I noticed she didn't say I'd always have a home there. I noticed she didn't say a lot of things. I took the envelope and I set it on the counter next to the fruit bowl. I said I needed time to look it over. Tyrone started to say something and Felicity touched his arm and they left. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after they drove away. Then I called my attorney. Her name is Rosalind. No, wait. Her name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is what she told me. She told me the document was legal. She told me that if I signed it, the house would belong to Tyrone and Felicity, and I would have no legal claim to it, regardless of what verbal promises they made about me staying. She told me that love and consideration as a transfer price was completely valid and that I would receive nothing. She also told me, gently, that based on what I was describing, this had the hallmarks of financial elder abuse. That phrase sat in my chest like a stone. Financial elder abuse. I was 63 years old. I had a master's degree. I had spent my career teaching other people's children how to read, and my son had sent me a document designed to take my house. I told my attorney I needed a few days. I drove home from her office, and I went up to my son's old bedroom, the one I'd kept mostly the same all these years. Different bedding, but the same furniture, the bookshelf still holding his science fair trophies and his high school yearbooks. I sat on the edge of the bed. I thought about the morning I brought him home from the hospital. He weighed 7 pounds, 4 ounces. I remember being terrified I'd break him. I thought about the $60,000. I thought about Greta's face when she told me about Felicity knocking on her door. I thought about the recovery room and the apple juice and 4:47 p.m. And then I stopped thinking about all of it, because none of it was going to help me decide what to do next. I did not sign the document. Instead, I spent 3 weeks doing something I probably should have done after the $60,000. I got my affairs in order. I updated my will. I removed Tyrone as the sole beneficiary. I established a trust. The house and whatever remained of my savings would be split between my daughter, Tyrone's younger sister, who lives in Memphis and calls me every Sunday morning now, because somebody has to, and 2 charities I've supported for years, a local literacy program and a women's shelter on the east side of Savannah. I did not tell Tyrone any of this. Then I called a real estate attorney, a different one, and I asked her what my options were for the property. I'd been thinking about something. A few years back, my church had been looking to expand their community center. They needed land, and the property behind mine had been unavailable at the time. Pastor needed space for a food pantry and an after-school program. I'd always felt a little guilty that I hadn't done more. I asked my real estate attorney how long a sale could take if I wanted to move quickly. She told me she could have it done in about 6 weeks with the right buyer. I told her I might have a buyer in mind. Then I called my pastor. I want to be careful here, because I'm not going to tell you I acted out of revenge. That's not entirely honest. The truth is that I was scared. I was 63 years old, and I had just found out that my son had hired an attorney to take my house. I had $60,000 less than I should have had. And I had the slow, nauseating realization that I had been handled, carefully, patiently, systematically, by my own child and his wife. Selling the house was partly about protection. Partly about getting ahead of what I could see coming. If the house was gone, there was nothing left to take. But I would be lying if I told you there wasn't a part of me that wanted my son to know what it felt like to have something disappear on him while he wasn't looking. I closed on the house on a Thursday morning in early January. I wasn't there for the signing. My attorney handled it. I was at a diner 2 miles away, eating eggs and toast and reading a mystery novel, and my hand was completely steady. By the time my son found out, I was already gone. I had arranged to stay with my daughter in Memphis while I figured out my next step. She picked me up at the airport in her minivan with my 3 grandchildren buckled in the back. And when I came out of the terminal, she got out of the car and hugged me without asking any questions. That's how I knew I'd done the right thing. Tyrone called me 23 times in the first 2 days. I let it go to voicemail every time. On the 3rd day, I listened to all of them. The first few were confusion. Mom, what's going on? Someone from the county sent me something about the property. Then anger. You need to call me right now. You cannot just, this is our house, Mom. Our house. Then desperation. I don't understand why you're doing this. We had an agreement. We were going to talk about this. Call me back. We had no agreement. We had never talked about it. He had shown up with a legal document and expected me to sign away my home. The last voicemail was quiet. He said, Mom, I know I messed up. I know I haven't been. And then he stopped. There was a long silence, the kind that sounds like someone trying to decide how much to admit. Then he said, I'm sorry about the 60,000s. I want to fix it. Please call me. I set the phone face down on my daughter's kitchen counter. I picked up my granddaughter, who is 4 years old, and had just decided that my earrings were the most interesting objects she had ever seen. I let her pull on them gently. I looked out the kitchen window at my daughter's backyard, at the bird feeder she'd put up by the fence. It was January in Memphis. The sky was that flat gray that means winter is serious. A cardinal landed on the feeder and then left. I called Tyrone back 6 days later. I want to be honest about this part too, because it would be easier to tell you I stayed strong and never looked back. But he's my son. He will always be my son. That's not a weakness I'm ashamed of. It's just the truth. I called him, and he answered on the first ring. I said, I'm going to talk and I need you to listen. He said, okay. I said, I am not angry at you. Anger takes energy I don't have anymore, and I'm not going to spend it. But I need you to understand what happened, so I'm going to tell you. And I did. I told him about Greta. I told him about the recovery room. I told him about the $60,000 and what it had cost me. Not just the money, but the year of sleep I'd lost over it, the months of telling myself I was being dramatic. I told him about sitting on the edge of his childhood bed the night after they'd brought me that document. I told him I'd sat there thinking about the morning I brought him home from the hospital. He cried. I could hear it. Men like my son don't cry easily, and it wasn't a small sound. I let him. When he was done, I said, I don't know what Felicity told you. I don't know how much of this was her idea and how much of it was yours. And honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you came into my house with a document drawn up by a lawyer to take the thing I worked my whole life for. And you didn't even look me in the eye when you put it on my table. Silence. You have to decide what kind of man you want to be, I said. Not for me, for yourself. And if you decide you want to have a relationship with your mother, I will be here. But I will not be managed. I will not be handled. And I will not be a resource you draw from when you need something. He said, I know. I said, I hope you do. I told him I loved him. Because I do. That has never been the question. Then I hung up. It's been 7 months since I closed on that house. I rent a small apartment now, on the 3rd floor of a building about a mile from my daughter's place. It has 2 bedrooms and a balcony that faces east, and every morning I drink my coffee out there and watch the sky get light. I don't have a backyard. I don't have pecan trees. But I also don't have a deed that someone is trying to get their hands on. And there's a peace in that I didn't expect. My daughter brings the grandchildren over on Saturdays. We make biscuits from scratch, which is something my mother taught me that I taught my daughter, and am now teaching her oldest, who is 7 and extremely serious about measuring flour. I think he might be a little like me. The community center at my church in Savannah broke ground on the expansion in March. I saw photos on their website. The new wing is going to have a full after-school program and a food pantry that can serve 200 families a week, where my pecan trees used to be. I think about that sometimes, about what land can become when you let it go to the right place. Tyrone and I speak occasionally, not often. He and Felicity are in couples counseling, which I know because he told me, and I told him I was glad. I mean that. I don't wish them misery. I just can't wish for things to go back to how they were, because how they were wasn't what I thought it was. Some people will tell you that families are supposed to work through everything. That love means staying and forgiving and rebuilding no matter what was broken. I've thought about that a lot, and I think it's partially true, and partially something people say when they've never had to sit in a hospital recovery room alone checking their phone. Love is real. And love is not enough on its own. Love without respect is just a story you tell yourself so you don't have to feel what's actually happening. I felt it. It took me longer than it should have, but I felt it. And when I finally did, I stopped waiting for someone to save me, and I saved myself instead. That's the only thing I know for certain now. The house is gone, and I am still here, and every morning the sun comes up over that balcony railing right on schedule, and I have my coffee, and I am not afraid.